Hello, and thank you for watching this Monday night, March 6th In-Depth Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, because we have new long-range data that was just released yesterday that we're going to analyze here in a few minutes, I thought it'd be worthwhile to go back and see how well the forecast did for winter. All right. So if we look back at what NOAA released in October, this was their overall synopsis of what winter was going to look like. And the synopsis was primarily governed by La Niña. And that was a good call. That was what the most dominant teleconnection was going into winter, and it lasted most of winter. And historically, if you were to correlate La Niñas against winter temperature patterns, it would be colder northern tier of the U.S., much warmer across the southern tier of the U.S. It would also favor a more active Ohio River Valley storm track, a lot of excess snow in the northwestern United States, and then drier along the south. That's what evidence we had last October and November to forecast. And nearly every long-range weather forecast looks something like this, either from the European model, the NMME, Columbia University, all of the different major agencies had some variant of this, all right? Now, we look at that and we say, well, how well did it verify? So take a good look here at the precipitation graphic and then look at this over here. This, again, is December 1 through March 1. And because of a couple of standout events, particularly the January onslaught of moisture into California that then rode right into here delivering a bunch of snow, and then the subsequent systems that dove into the United States like this and then curled up under a large subtropical ridge here, this is what we end up getting. All right. Now, if we go back again and say, what about that temperature pattern? The models had a split north-south on the temperature pattern, but the pattern was a bit more dynamic than that, more wavy than that. And instead we favored, more often these deeper troughs over the west, all right, big subtropical ridge here. And as a result, the flow split more along the southwest to northeast trajectory. And that's why we saw much warmer conditions east of the Mississippi and across the south than we did through the western United States. Now, this is not to pick on NOAA, not even close. It is the best weather forecasting agency on a national level that we could ask for. It's just a point of showing you how difficult these long-range forecasts can be. Now, with all of that, what we need to do is understand that the newest forecast is showing a pretty aggressive shift away from La Niña. We've been in that for 3 years. We talked about that on Thursday. The newest data just released continue to show that. In fact, most of the ensemble members from the European model have El Nino-like behavior in the atmosphere at some point in summer. Could this be too aggressive? Sure. We could be in weak El Nino or INSO neutral conditions for much of this summer. But as it stands, it's hard to find a forecast that doesn't do this. Now remember, we still need to get through spring to see how this is really going to evolve, but you have to understand that since December, this prediction here has been pretty good. A year ago, it was not. We had predicted a collapse of La Niña last year, at least a pause during the summer. It didn't do it. But there's a lot more supporting evidence of this change right now. And a lot of that has to do with the trade wind behavior and the major increase in atmospheric momentum, which we're going to talk about in a few moments. But to show you what that looks like, here we go. This is the sea surface temperature anomalies going forward into April, May, June, July, August, and we'll go all the way out there to September. Now, there's a couple things I notice here. All right, to get this kind of a warm signal, El Nino, we've got to either have almost a complete stoppage of the trade winds, or maybe even seeing a net reversal. You notice that the Indian Ocean is playing along with this. See the cooler water there and the warmer here? This is a positive Indian Ocean dipole outlook. And what that means is we have a lot of subsidence in the atmosphere in this area. So Australia has significant risk of going into drought as they approach their winter. That's something we're going to watch carefully. We also talked about how the cold water that is currently sitting right in through this area is continued to be forecast to moderate going forward. Should that not happen, that will compete against this La Niña for drought issues in the central United States. But as it stands, it looks like we're going to have a positive Indian Ocean dipole, a positive INSO signal, or El Nino, and a negative Pacific decadal oscillation, all things we've been discussing. Now, the models are taking all of this in and weighing all of this, and I'm just going to skip over spring for a moment and show you the newest updates for summer. So this is what I've been getting asked a lot about, so let's just have a discussion about it. At this point, June, July, August temperatures are looking above average for a broad section here of the U.S., honestly, to be east of the Rocky Mountains. It has the warmest temperatures over Texas, exactly where they were a year ago, especially in summer. But what's really important here is that if you look for coherent signals in the pattern of the model, this region being wetter than normal for most of the summer, and this has been included in the previous forecast as well, that keeps showing up as a signal. What I'm kind of amazed by here is we are not getting a strong southwestern monsoon signal. So to get a strong southwestern monsoon signal, you've got to have big ridging in this area. We do see drier conditions possibly in Texas, but it appears in the model right now that the Bermuda high will probably stay over Bermuda. And how close it comes to the East Coast will be important to understand. But the model right now is also not suggesting a big West Coast ridge. And that's something that I've been worried about for summer, but it's not showing up in the model right now, big West Coast ridge. I thought that with the transition to El Nino, we would start to see that. Overall, you look at this forecast, and we don't see major patterns jumping out at us other than this wet signal. And that hits a lot of the Great Lakes, the Northeast, the Corn Belt, parts of the plains, and the Pacific Northwest as well. So we just need to take this and put it kind of into our portfolio of forecasts we're going to be reviewing this month as we go forward, knowing that it is March. Now, fun question to ask, what did the model say last year for in March for summer? So I dug this up in a presentation I gave last year, and what it suggested was for June, July, August 2022, active southwestern monsoon, wet east of the Mississippi for the most part, and risk of being drier throughout the plains into the Canadian Prairie and in the Pacific Northwest. So that was the forecast issued in March of 2022 for June, July, August 2022. Now we know that during a season you can have substantial events that come through and can offset statistics. For example, remember the late August massive rainfall event that came through Texas, put down over a foot of rain in the lower Mississippi River Valley? That's reflected here. But we did have an active southwest monsoon. We were drier than normal. In fact, the epicenter of the drought was right here, mid-June, all the way to the end of July. And could we say we were wet everywhere east of the Mississippi? No. I mean, there was drought in parts of Illinois. There were droughts that showed up in the Carolinas, Florida, but we can't also make the argument that the model didn't find some sort of a pattern. So I'm just showing you this because when I just showed you the newest long-range data, I need you to know that the European model is a good performer. It does often give us a signal. And right now, the thing that is dominating the signal going out this far is the fact that there is no strong La Niña anymore. It's faded. It's gone. If we build in an El Nino, this is what we typically get. I want to contrast that to the newest updates here from the Climate Prediction Center. So we'll just jump right ahead on to summer again because I'm going to come back and do spring in a moment. But this is what the temperature pattern currently looks like from the CPC. Now they have a bit different of an outlook by trying to anchor a broader ridge over the west that could keep things hotter than normal from the Great Basin down to Texas. So this again is the Climate Prediction Center as a part of the National Weather Service. We can then say, well, what about the precipitation pattern from June, July, August? And it's kind of got this hint of some sort of ridging event here and maybe a stronger Bermuda high there. You see, if you end up getting this setup, I don't know, something like this, we do tend to park stationary fronts in this area, delivering a lot of rainfall. I think that's what the CPC is going at this point. And we'll watch for updates, but this is just something to compare and contrast to, all right? Now, before we go much farther, I do want to point out again that this La Niña is fading very, very quickly. We've now seen an expansion of the warm water here, and the ocean temperatures here are almost now back up to average. They're just a little cooler than average. This negative PDO signal is still strong, and so you can see the cold water here with the warm water tucked away right in through this area. And again, like I said, these are competing factors. If we want to really realize here it is, this as a summer forecast for the plains, the Corn Belt, the Great Lakes, the East, then what needs to happen, sorry, I'm bouncing around here a little bit, there we go, is that this needs to fade back toward more normal temperatures, and that would be a strong signal. All right. Now, one other thing to consider here is with this fading La Niña and the almost removal of it, if we do build in El Nino conditions, which is what the models were suggesting here, this is going to have a major impact on wind shear in the Atlantic, at least it does historically, which means even though we have warmer than normal ocean temperatures currently forecast for September, in the Atlantic, increased wind shear could limit tropical cyclone development. That would be what history would tell us about that time period. Okay. So from here, let's now come back and talk about spring, because spring is almost always a volatile month. It's very difficult to pin down a single pattern in spring. It almost always fluctuates quite rapidly. So let's just look forward from now to April 15th. For many, I'm just thinking about people in the Midwest, because those folks I live with, I know that this is going to be getting you past, insurance dates for when you can plant crops. And the models continue to be wetter from the Central Plains through, the I states, even wetter than normal in the upper Midwest, and all really wet signal down here in the Mid-South to the Southeast. That's been constant. The signal in the West being wet all the way through mid-April is probably mostly going to be the wet conditions that we're going to be seeing through the middle of March showing up here. Overall. And on the temperature side of it, it looks something like this. Important trend in this temperature forecast, though, is that the depth of the cold expected, especially over the next 15 days in this corridor, has been reduced. And there are some hints of some moderation in these temperatures relatively quickly. In other words, I don't think we're going to stay there. So in other words, you look out there and say, well, what about April, May, and June average temperatures? You notice that the new seasonal update isn't bringing in and keeping that colder air after March. Now, there's many different things that could shift that around. But at this point, we're just using the model as guidance, and it would suggest that more normal spring temperatures are kind of on the way. But if we look again at the spring precipitation, this area through here is the area I'm watching to be quite wet. And there's a lot of snow on the ground right in through here right now. And therefore, when that begins to melt, that's going to negate any sort of a dry forecast. I am concerned about the Canadian prairie starting off spring dry. But notice how the model is attempting in April, May, and June to bring moisture back into the southern plains. And this is absolutely critical to this area should this verify. Now, in the near term, now that we've seen that, what are the big drivers? Well, the MJO is still showing this phase 8 to it. And again, I'm struggling to understand why it's such an high amplitude in phase 8, and if it's really a transient feature due to convective coupling, or if it's really there. But I do know the trade winds have let go, and so I can make a case for this. And we know that historically, MJO phase 8 will send the jet stream farther to the south near Hawaii. There tends to be weak ridging, therefore more mild conditions across the west. And we also tend to get troughs off the east, which means we're going to bring cold out of the Canadian prairie into the east. So I can justify this all day long. And the models are beginning to show it as well. So we talked about this last week, but let's do it again today. And the Pacific jet, which for so much of February went here, broke into a ridge, dove into the west, and ejected over a subtropical ridge, is now expected to extend and shift south, which means it comes down here, targets California, and comes across the United States and out. And that's a much different pattern than what we've seen in a while. And the concern is that by the end of this week on Friday, we're going to get the full effect of that, what we call Pineapple Express. That's the flow coming from Hawaii into the West Coast. And putting together both the GFS and European ensembles, we noticed that on the 10th to the 11th, there is, according to the forecast here of the strength of the atmospheric river events, we're looking at a strong event and possibly a repeat of that all the way through the 15th. See how some of the ensemble members are jumping up there again. So this is going to put together a very, very wet mid-March, especially for California. And then we're going to watch the extension of that move across the rest of the country. But because of the southern displacement in the jet stream, that is why the models for mid-March to mid-April are keeping this region so wet. And in the Delta, we're trying to plant a crop. In Texas, we're trying to plant a crop. There's planting all throughout the southeast where it should be mild enough to do this, but the risk of being wet is still very much showing up in the models here. Okay, so what does that Pacific jet extension look like? We've been talking about this now for a while, so let's just have a look at the newest data. See the jet stream doing this? This is by this Friday. And if I just continue to play this out, we just notice that there is no major break in this going through the middle of the month. It appears that the jet's going to stay south, stay extended, and it's going to continue to push systems across the United States for at least the next 10 to 15 days. So I just want to show you what that result looks like by going to the 12Z European model. We're just going to add up this precip. Now, the goal of doing this is to look for where the precip is going to be and where it's not going to be. This is just kind of a quick hit to just see the haves and have-nots. Now, while there is some moisture coming back into the western plains, you could make a case that this whole region continues to show up drier. Extremely wet from the Red River Valley through the lower Mississippi River Valley, Tennessee Valley, and down into the southeast. Much of this is all going to be snow. We're going to talk about how much snow in just a few moments. There are systems that keep showing up in the models trying to curl up the East Coast on this. We'll have a look at the latest from those in a few moments. But what I want to draw your attention to is the West. Now, we have covered the West in depth in so many videos in terms of how much snow and how much liquid is in that snow. Some places over 80 inches of liquid in 20 to 30 feet of snow that's packed up in the mountains. My biggest concern with this is that not only are the models attempting to put down 10 to 20 inches of liquid in the next 10 plus days, but because of the mildness of the Pacific air, that snow line is going to start to creep up, meaning we're going to put rain on snow. And this is going to dramatically increase the flood issues for California. I'll be honest, if you're watching this content in California, and I'm not trying to overhype this, I just need you to stay aware of what this situation is, because flooding is the number 2 weather-related killer in the United States, behind heat. And I need you to know that the situation, for me personally, is looking just a bit more significant and serious than I normally discuss. Now, if we come in and see the exact amounts, let's just play this out. I'm just going to run you out the whole model run. You do notice that in several events, we'll get the timing of them in a few moments, the ECMWF is putting down 20 inches of liquid here. Now, this will be snow in the Sierra, but a lot of 7, 8, 9 total inches. I think Southern California is spared this. Same thing for the Pacific Northwest. These atmospheric river vents are narrow. They tend to target a very specific spot here, but that's what we see. On the total snowfall amounts, I mean, I'll just blow this up so you can see it in through here. Sorry, let's get that all the way out to 10 days. I mean, the European model just came in with 131 inches of snow in parts of the Sierra Nevada. Is that possible? I can't rule it out because of how much moisture is coming in with this. But this is a significant late season push in snow. And it's in the Upper Colorado Basin. It's in the Northern Rockies. It's in the Cascades. And then what's coming out in the plains, we'll talk about that in just a few seconds. But I want to show you the latest from the Weather Service out of Sacramento. And this is the statement right here I'm most concerned about. We have had snow levels like they're going to see Monday and Wednesday down between 1,000 and 2,500 feet. That's where most of them have been with this cold air we've been dealing with. But what you notice is short break in the weather with rain and mountain snow returning late in the day, rising snow levels to 25 to 5,000 feet. And that warmer weather system continues. So this is the end of this week. Getting that number up that high, that's a major concern for how much flooding we'll get when we put rain on top of snow. Now, I also showed you, if we come back here, that, that there's quite a bit of moisture coming into the Midwest and in the MidSouth. And there's a bunch of snow on top of this already. So we know that over this right now, there is in some places 2 to 4 inches of liquid in the snow. And we expect heavier precipitation to come in here where it's already flooding. Nearly every little river in this part, like the tributaries in the Mississippi, are showing some sort of flood. Look at the substantial improvement we've seen in Missouri, parts of eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, in these soil moisture values. Don't forget, like a month ago, these were down around 2 to 5%. And there's a bunch percolating into this area here coming in very soon. Part of that's because in the last 7 days, we saw a system that absolutely soaked this area. This is just looking at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. And if we take a look at what it looks like from the past month, this is percent of normal precipitation. So there is a lot of places where I was very concerned about that soil moisture. I said, if March, April, and May rains don't undo it, we have problems. Well, that we're seeing this undone. Some places in here up to 300% of normal precipitation. And for the upper Midwest, it's all been snow. In fact, we just got a bunch of snow the last couple of days into this area. Some places up to 6 to 7 inches of snow. Now, where it's been drier, this part of Texas, southern Texas, down toward the Rio Grande. Sorry, I always think of Rio Grande do Sul. That's in South America. But this Rio Grande. And down into Florida, it's been very dry as well. So we have to keep this perspective into this month of March. Now, I do want to show you again, I put this in this morning, but it's worth looking at again. If you're curious just how much snow we're talking about, what you're going to see here, look at this. We have these two areas of 50 to 60 inches of snow. But you come south of that, there's people down here saying, where's the snow? We haven't gotten any of it. And in the west, Total snowfall in the hundreds of inches in parts of the upper Colorado Basin, and of course at the highest peaks much more, 300 inches. I mean, these numbers are just absolutely amazing to see here in the western United States. And if you compare that to normal, this is what you end up getting. So we have a surplus of 20 to 30 inches of snow through this area. Same thing through here. Whereas south of it, significant deficits. And we've been talking about this a lot this winter. So no new news here. But where we haven't had the snow, it's been extremely wet, especially into this area. So that's the perspective I want to gain out of this. Now, where's this new snow going to be coming in? Now, we've already showed you the west. I want you to now see what we're expecting here in the upper Midwest, in the northern plains, getting into this little stripe right here into Pennsylvania. That'll be an important one to look at in a moment. But this is the probability of getting another 6 inches of snow in the next 10 days. And it's quite high right into this part of North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota. And that's where we're going to see this heaviest snow. Okay, so that's all big picture stuff, a lot to cover there. Let's now get into some details. I have just loved watching the systems curl up off the west coast, and this is a beauty here. Deep low, several sub-vortices on the inside of it, little eddies spinning up there, and that's our current coastal low that's sitting just off the west coast. So what do we have out of this? When you look at the latest all hazards weather map, I'll show you why we got the winter weather advisories here, winter storm warnings, and the winter storm warnings in the west. But I want you to note, all of these polygons in through here represent where there's flooding on the river systems. Take a look at that too. That is where we've got the winter storm warning coming through here just in the next couple of days. So let's go see it. This is the 18Z NAM on Monday. So let's cue this up right around 7 o'clock tonight. Large area of high pressure, snow on either side of it. See that? So as we play this forward, notice that tonight into tomorrow morning, coming through Pennsylvania, that's where we're getting some of that really heavy snow right in through this area. And that'll be through Tuesday morning. See that? On the other side of it, it's a lot of scattered snow showers from parts of Montana getting into the northern plains, but also coming out from Colorado where there might be some freezing rain getting into the north central plains. So this is going through the day on Tuesday and getting out there toward Tuesday night. Now on Wednesday, we're going to be watching this system attempt to take shape in the midwestern part of the country. So watch this again. This is Tuesday night through Wednesday. Through the whole day on Wednesday. And there's this system kind of gathering strength right here in the midsection of the country. It's waiting on this little kicker wave that's coming through here. Now, where was that kicker wave before? It's the one that's prompted the winter storm warnings for Northern California throughout the day on Tuesday. So from here, let's broaden this out and now see the GFS versus the European. So we've already played through that point on Wednesday. So let's stop it there on early Thursday morning. Both models are attempting to produce a relatively large low-pressure system midsection of the country. And now you can see that the GFS very aggressive on the snows in South Dakota, really getting into northern Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota. It's there in the European, just not nearly as snowy. And while that's all going on, here's the first of those atmospheric river events. There's not only a low to the north of it, but there's the strong onshore flow we keep talking about. So we got to watch two spots as I animate the end of this week. Thursday night, getting into Friday morning, Friday afternoon, evening. See the snow spreading through the upper Midwest into the Great Lakes, rain to the south. And this is the full effect of that strong onshore flow event, the first one. So heavy, heavy precipitation coming into California. Going into Saturday and Sunday, the models are completely split on what's going to go into New England. So when I talk about how active this is, I mean, it's just amazing to see 1, 2, 3 separate systems. The GFS is a little different. It wants to pull in a decent nor'easter here. And the Europeans got this thing way off the coast. That's going to be a tough call to make. Because I know I've made a case for the European model lately, but I'll be honest, the GFS has actually been hitting a few home runs as of late. So I'll be watching this all week and reporting it to you to see what's going to happen by this upcoming weekend. That's just through the next 6 days. We then see just more activity slamming into the west as systems just continue to pull across the country. I could spend an hour detailing out each one of these systems, so we just need to get a bigger picture of what's going on. How about that snow in the upper Midwest? European model putting down the snow here through Saturday. So we have a pretty big corridor of 3 to 8 inches of snow in this area. That's come down a bit from some of the bigger forecasts of over a foot in this area we saw. I'm not yet ready to show you what's going on in the in parts of New England. And you saw this a few moments ago when you noticed that the probability of getting at least 6 inches of snow is only highest here. It all depends if these systems get off coast or if they come up the coast. And we don't know that yet. It's not there yet. I can't pick it up. But what I can tell you is down here in the MidSouth, very wet. Same thing with the western United States. And this is the probability of getting, we switched to a new model run here. Let's go back to that 12Z. And I'll play out there again. That's the probability of getting 2 inches of liquid out of this. And let's just keep going up. 4 inches of liquid. Now your attention goes to the west coast. 8 inches of liquid. 15. So notice there's a 10% chance of 15 inches of liquid in this, but a much bigger chance of 8 and 4 with the atmospheric rivers that are coming into the west. That is top priority for me right now in this forecasting. All right. Temperatures. That big subtropical ridge over the southeast is what's dominated the pattern for the last 30 days, and it's out. It's getting kicked out right now as we speak. What that's done, though, is it's kept things very mild to start off the year, and this is using the National Phenology Network. I'll visit this quite a few times this spring, showing you the spring leaf index anomaly. It's a measure of how early spring is. And what you notice here is that we're anywhere between 15 to 20 plus days earlier than normal. Well, the problem is that the temperatures over the next 7 to 15 days are going to start to deliver much colder air down here. So we'll start investigating these frost maps in every forecast. Everywhere in gray is where the National Digital Forecast Database is suggesting a frost event. Now, there was some concern earlier in the week that this cold air outbreak that we do expect to happen in through here may bring enough cold air to possibly cause some problems with the winter wheat crop in Kansas. And remember, it was hit hard back in December. But if you watch the minimum temperatures compared to normal, we're just going to get right to when the colder air starts to advance. So this is Thursday. There's Friday, Saturday. This is our first push of colder air. We're looking at temperatures, overnight low temperatures in Kansas in the low 20s, maybe getting down into the upper teens. If I remember correctly, we've got to get these temperatures down much colder than this to cause major problems on the winter wheat crop. And the models aren't leaving that colder air around that long. What about the high temperatures? Well, these were Monday's high temperatures. That's Tuesday. Getting into Wednesday, much cooler air comes behind that first system. There's Thursday into Friday. That's when the colder air axis kind of sets up here. And we advance that into Saturday and Sunday. But as we talked about at the beginning, the newest model trends over the weekend and now today on Monday suggest that the duration and extent of this colder air we're expecting in the middle of the month is no longer nearly as far south or as deep in terms of being cold into this corridor. Instead of seeing temperatures 10 to 20 degrees colder than normal for an extended time period, we're now talking about 5 to maybe 15 and much more mild conditions coming from Texas up into Colorado. Now that gets you out to March 16th. So that's the 11th through the 16th. Let's keep playing. As you saw earlier, we need to see this pattern break into the third week of March. And there seems to be, based off MJO analysis, a break coming after that. So I do not right now have evidence to say that this really cold air stays established going fully into the month of April. And that means this whole region that's under a lot of snow right now is going to have to watch for as the snow begins to melt later this month. Okay? All right, how about the last couple things here? South America. We still have the heat on in a big way centered on the Paraná River and surrounding states in Argentina. And today's 12Z model run for the next 10 days actually went drier in this area. It kept wetter conditions farther to the south. It did not bow to the GFS, which tried to bring a lot of rain in through here. But notice to the north in this corridor in central Brazil, this includes Mato Grosso do Sul, Sao Paulo, Bahia, very wet conditions in through here. But notice the model tried to dry out Paraná, and that is a state that needs to get some harvesting done. The wetter conditions in Mato Grosso are going to be just pedal to the metal in terms of the size of this safrinha crop that's in, and it's good for the start of that crop, so I want you to see that. Globally, though, temperature-wise, you can see the heat here, but notice much of Europe is mild again, and much of Asia is very mild. This is the axis of colder air in the northern hemisphere right now. It's there, and it's over part of the North Atlantic. But I'll finish with one last graphic I showed this morning. The same setup that's delivering these atmospheric rivers to California, it's got a kind of a reflection of that in the Atlantic. And what we're doing here is we're seeing the models increase the chances for precipitation in Europe. And remember, we reported on this last week. Parts of Germany, France, the British Isles, the Iberian Peninsula have been very dry. So this is really important moisture coming into this area. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I really appreciate you hanging on to the end of this one. We had a lot to cover. Keep an eye on each one of these morning forecasts, as they will really reveal a lot. Also, this upcoming Thursday and the following Monday, my colleagues are going to do the in-depth reports, Matt Reardon and Andrew Pritchard. I have just a very extensive travel schedule coming up, and it's going to be challenging for me to meet those deadlines in the evening due to flights. So they're just going to cover for me a couple of forecast videos. It's good to get some new voices in there too, and they bring an excellent analysis. So I'm excited for them to report to all of you. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon. Thanks.